the article in detail. Well, we probably won't have time to do it in detail.
I'll do my best. I have a lot to say. A lot of thoughts.
Good evening. You're on the smoking section, and tonight I have my good friend and colleague Paul Neff, who is going to be on with me, and we're going to talk about. But first of all, I wanted to bring up Phil Mitza, one of our colleagues, wrote a very good letter to the Somerville group of aldermen, I guess the aldermen of Somerville, which is the equivalent of the city council in Cambridge,
Okay.
protesting their ban of smoking in public housing in Somerville.
Excellent.
So he wrote a good letter and he sent it to me, and I was going to read it on the program tonight, but I forgot to bring it.
Well, you know, we all should write letters like that when we see an injustice like that.
Every letter counts,
Yes.
and Phil's letter was extremely to the point, short, to the point, and it was not at all hyperbolic, which is nice, because sometimes I think people get a little carried away.
Yeah. Well, something else I think is important is that when we do these things, contact officials, let other people know that we're doing it, because one thing the media's done over the years is sweep all dissent under the rug, you know, underreport the protests that have occurred at every one of these hearings that we've seen.
Right. Well, I mean, I certainly think the Cambridge Chronicle did us well, and
They've been much better.
and I think Cambridge Day also.
I think the media may be coming around in general.
You think we may be winning over the media?
They're talking back to them more.
And when
Yeah.
you say talking back to them, who is them?
That's a good question. The anti-smoking movement is composed of the actual activists who genuinely feel this way and politicians who've signed on, and I don't know why that is, but they have. Universally,
Well, I
I
think-
mean, it's popular with politicians all over the world, but
Bill Cunningham doesn't like to use the word activists. He doesn't think they are activists. He thinks they're
no, that's not a good word, because they're paid. They're professional.
professional. I call them, the best phrase I've come up with is professional tobacco control activists, or wait, professional anti-tobacco activists.
Anti is better, yeah.
And you speak.
And you know, it's probably worth pointing out that all the time that they are prohibitionists. I mean, they're not talking about a limited degree of control. They're really out to make sure that, well, they feel they have a job to do as long as someone is still smoking.
Well, I mean, I
As
think
long as there's still some place to smoke, then their work is cut out for them. That's how.
I think they've been reasonably forthright about that. I mean, the World Health Organization has, a couple of weeks ago, had World No Tobacco Day. So I think it's pretty clear. I mean, I think they're being reasonably clear that they do want to eventually outlaw the use of tobacco worldwide.
Right. Even so, if there's not somebody like us and anyone that wants to do what we're doing, and people that are doing similar work, if not for that, people might take their eye off the ball.
Yes, true.
You know,
That's true.
People are busy. You don't have time to follow every issue at all times, and it's easy to forget. You know,
Well,
on the other hand, on the positive side of things, people who have come up and signed our petitions, I've never seen a more diverse group of people agree on something.
Right. Well, yes, that's true. It's interesting to me because when we have our table set up, as we have been doing daily, it's oftentimes I'm surprised. It's hard to predict if someone is going to be for or against us. I mean, I don't think you can judge from looking at them for the most part.
I thought of an idea if we had the funding to do it, put up a poster like they did with AIDS, I think, and
Yes.
they've done things like that. Put up just a bunch of citizens and say, spot the smokers.
Oh, really?
You know,
Yeah.
identify them, because how do you look like a smoker?
Right.
You know, and after over 50 years, you know, they had the health warning, and to that they've added all kinds of disincentives They've tried to get other citizens, the non-smokers, to persecute them,
Right, now let me, yeah,
and people are not doing that.
Okay.
And to this
Okay.
day, you cannot say that smoking is a sign of stupidity.
well, I don't, certainly not, I don't think.
Right. Well, I mean, if they've been successful in getting people to think the way they do, then,
Well, they have had a certain measure of success, you wouldn't dispute that.
but disproportionately, that success has been with the people that make laws, people that own property, like big landlords, and not with, say, people in other professions like hairdressing or, sculpting or
Right, I mean,
psychology.
they've been more successful with certain elements of society than with other elements. I think you'd say that, but, and I would agree with you on that. But speaking of professional anti-smoking activists, anti-tobacco activists, we both read this interesting op-ed in the New York Times, which came out on Friday, on June 3rd, by a woman named Joanna Cohen, who is the director of the Institute for Global Tobacco Control at Johns Hopkins University. And the op-ed was in favor of what has been called graphic warnings, which turn out to be these images of diseased lungs and diseased other organs that putatively were damaged by tobacco. Now, she says that this came out from the FDA 5 years ago, and the tobacco companies sued the FDA because they said this was a form of compelled speech.
Right.
And that they are protected by the First Amendment, and that the government can mandate warning labels, but those warning labels have to be factual and not designed to provoke an emotional response.
Right.
And so that was a very important decision.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like many other countries have a First Amendment like we have.
No. In other countries like Australia, they've been able to go farther.
Well, even farther than the graphic warnings.
Like to make so-called pro-smoking speech illegal and things like that.
Oh, right. Well, I only know one country, New Zealand, who's done that. But in other words, in Australia and Canada, they have said they've gone further than the graphic warnings, and they've got what they call plain packaging. And you know what plain packaging is?
Yeah.
What is it?
It's no graphics.
Right.
There are no graphics to identify the brand or make it more appealing than the next.
Right.
Right. It's like a brown paper, the equivalent of a brown paper bag. And they're making themselves look very silly because just the fact that they have to go this far to get smoking out of the culture, which is a ridiculous goal in the first place, because it's universal.
So you think
because
that
people have always smoked.
you think they're making themselves look bad by the extent to which they are going?
Yeah, because up to the present, they haven't created a situation where only silly or ignorant people smoke. They haven't come anywhere near that. And they failed to get everyone to stop smoking by 2000.
Now,
And they failed. I mean, the smoking bans haven't succeeded. There are people now that have started and lived their whole lifetimes with smoking bans.
That's true.
Lived in like cities where you can't go to a nightclub, any nightclub, and smoke.
well, states like Massachusetts, for example.
Right.
And it's interesting to me that it was the images that she speaks about was, one photo showed healthy lungs compared to blackened and diseased ones that had been poisoned by tobacco. Now, you said your sister even kind of saw through that.
Yeah. And now we know that they've been known, antis that is, to show diseased lungs as typical smokers' lungs.
Right,
We know that's been done, and we know that they've used.
So the trick of that is that they're taking a diseased lung and a healthy lung and implying that the diseased lung is typical of a smoker and that it was caused by smoking.
Right. And some of these messages that we've heard over the years, like designed to make it very, very ugly, we can, a lot of us know personally to be false. Like the one about kissing a smoker's like kissing an ashtray.
Right.
Well, when I was about 18, I found out that's not true.
No?
No.
But
like everybody can take examples like that. They can check it out. Well, is this true or not?
Well, and then the other one here we got here was teeth stained and rotted and the lower lip abscessed. That's another one of the images that they want to put on the. Mm-hmm. Do you think that smoking contributes to poor dental hygiene?
I never heard that one. I've never been sold that one.
You never. No one's even tried to sell you on that one.
No, not really.
Do you believe it?
I don't see any reason to.
No.
Intuitively, I accepted what they said in 1964, and I've been sort of keeping an eye on the mortality of people I know to see how it holds up. And I have not been on board with these subsequent efforts to say it's worse than we knew in 1964. Because, there's a limit to how much worse it can be. And,
you take one cigarette and you explode, for example. That would be about as bad as you could get.
How much worse? What I do know is that all the friends that I've had that I've located on Facebook who started smoking young are still alive and well.
And you probably know friends who never started smoking who unfortunately are deceased.
I don't know who's deceased, actually. During my lifetime, I've lost friends to suicide, auto accidents, drinking related, to liver disease.
Right.
Things like that. I knew a guy that had emphysema or whatever they call it now.
And did he get that? Did he?
He died. He died. He smoked and he died. And
COPD.
Oh yeah. My feeling is that maybe some people are prone to it. That tobacco smoke can trigger it in some people.
Or perhaps...
not all drinkers get cirrhosis,
Right, that's right. That's right. And then one of the images that she had was really kind of humorous.
Yeah.
I thought, did you read this one? Another showed a woman wailing in pain.
Oh, yeah.
From the deadly effects of secondhand smoke.
So I'm picturing she's sitting in the Algiers back when you could smoke up there, and she's just screaming her head off.
I guess so. That's like what Bill Cunningham once said. When they talk about...
Bill Cunningham doesn't smoke.
Oh, no, so not Bill Cunningham. Our good friend...
But he's not. Yeah.
Michael McFadden, when they were saying that like a whiff of tobacco smoke could get someone to get a heart attack, and Michael McFadden said, well, how many times have you been into a smoky bar where people have been sitting there 8 hours and seen people slumped over from having a heart attack?
Right.
And, McFadden, you got to really listen to McFadden.
He's great. He's great. He's funny and erudite.
Erudite. He's about the most, sometimes a little bit too erudite for us earthlings. But, one thing he had was in his book, Anti-Smoking Brains, he had a photograph of what happened at the World Trade Center with these huge plumes of smoke disseminating all over lower Manhattan. And the EPA said nobody had to worry about that in terms of lung health.
Right.
But like the slightest whiff of the secondhand smoke from a cigarette is like a known human carcinogen.
It's preposterous, and I don't know anyone that believes that. Well,
another thing she says is the tobacco industry has bullied us enough. That seems to be...
they're pretty whipped. I mean, that's my perception. I think that should be most people's.
One might think so.
They've had all these lawsuits. They've had to back down. They have to relinquish their profits to the government, which is building skyrocketing addiction to the revenues from tobacco taxes.
Well, let me ask you a question, though. Is anything that you have ever personally seen in your lifetime, or anything that you had direct contact with you, that you've had with, is it any way shown you that the tobacco companies acted improperly in any way?
Well, no. I mean, corporations aren't known to be moral entities. They're sort of amoral. And I don't think they ever did anything particularly bad. And I don't think they've had a whole lot of control over the way people act either. I mean, the ads were taken off the air years ago.
1970.
Right, and then the ads in magazines dwindled to almost nothing. So really the only advertising is from what they call modeling, which is like people smoking in public.
Well, yes, right. That's a good point.
They call that modeling.
Right, but meaning that, now they're trying to say that they can't even put their brand image, they can't even put the name of their brand in an attractive way on their own packages.
See, they're becoming grotesque.
The professional anti-smoking activists.
Right.
Well, they're certainly going to the absolute limit in terms of censorship that anybody could get.
Yes, and there are people in the public eye like Kate Winslet who, like, in a subtle way in their movies seem to be saying, we don't go along with this at all. And I know in interviews she's talked about how silly this all is.
Well, I don't think it's quite so silly. I mean, to me, I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of power that is being.
The power is not silly. That's as serious as a loaded.
Well, and also I think that a lot of smokers' lives are being very negatively impacted.
I think everybody's life is negatively impacted when we're being acclimated to this kind of authoritarianism.
And
I don't think the average, I was thinking about this. I don't think most non-smokers think of themselves as especially virtuous. A lot of people don't smoke because it's just not their style. They don't like it. They're too shy. It's easier for them to hold a bottle of beer. That's
right. Okay.
And I know I was always embarrassed as a kid being praised as a non-smoker by adults, because you're just following your inclinations.
Right. Well, I think,
and I don't think most people are puritanical.
No, but I do think the anti-smoking movement has. We have this argument, you and I, all the time, but let's not even go there, because how successful have they been? Certainly, they have been successful on the legislative level.
Yes.
And certainly those legislators, like our Cambridge City Council and the Mass State Legislature, who have highly taxed tobacco, have restricted it everywhere. Like, we can't smoke where we're sitting right now. We can't smoke in a bar. I mean, 30 years ago, it would be unthinkable that you couldn't smoke in a bar in Massachusetts. Now it's unthinkable that you could.
That's yeah. I have to admit they made a lot of inroads.
Right. And those legislators who have voted for this kind of stuff have not been voted out of office. They seem to be running again. So they must have had a certain success in winning the hearts and minds of the public.
They've had altogether too much success.
Well, I would agree with that. I think it's scary because it's just like 1984. I mean, it shows how you can, with clever, PR campaign and lots of money, and you can and often enjoy a lot of success with manipulating the minds of the public.
Yeah,
But you were right. I mean, you're also right that there are a lot of us who continue smoking. There are younger people who continue smoking. In fact, I met a young fellow from Bennington College today who might be coming to our meeting on Saturday.
Excellent. Well, another thing I see, because I always keep my eyes open, is I see groups of people, just typical groups, and more I see that, like, one of them will be smoking, just a mixed group.
Right.
And the others are not avoiding this person. So people, I mean, people are being very polite, but they're not, within their own groups, they're kind of loose about it.
Well, you know,
Smoking or non-smoking. I know every job I ever had, if we went to a bar or a cafe and it had a smoking and non-smoking section, we'd all sit in the smoking, so no one would have to get up and leave.
right. So now you know, what was interesting to me about this op-ed, another thing is that I thought, for example, it was going to be about plain packaging, but it wasn't about plain packaging.
Right.
This is only those so-called graphic warning labels.
Right.
Which, what do you think their motive is for putting these on tobacco packages?
Well, I mean, everything else has failed. And
Or it hasn't succeeded anywhere to the extent that they would like it to?
nowhere near.
Right, that's true.
The fact that actors still smoke in
Right.
movies, that people aren't ashamed to be seen
Right,
smoking, that
right.
falls far short, and that should really give them second thoughts about this, that, you know, whether this is ethical. But it has.
I don't think
they're determined to win.
Well, I think we have to convince them to some degree. You know, it's partially us who has to show them how they're misguided.
I mean, the prime movers behind all
Yeah, even
this?
the prime movers.
I don't think,
even the prime movers. You think-
no, I don't think that's ever going to be possible. But I think eventually they may see that they have made themselves ridiculous in the eyes of most people.
And well, you know how I don't like that word ridiculous, though.
Like all words, I mean, it depends on the context.
Yeah, I think.
They will look absurd in the long run.
I hope so. I
For
just
their
hope,
faith
I hope we live to see it.
in authoritarianism.
I hope we live to see it. I hope we live to see it. And you know, I think eventually, I tend to agree with you. I think, you know, I tend to think that we've got a very, very good chance of turning this around. Whether or not we turn around in the next 20 years or so or not, I don't know.
But I've seen a lot more books over the years on the subject. I mean, in this century, you know, say the last 5 years. Like that new book, what's it called?
It's called Smoke Free, and it's by a woman named Simone I don't know. She's Australian, and
Yeah.
she considers herself to be a social anthropologist.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think I've read part of it.
It's very, very good.
Yeah.
She quotes our good friend Michael McFadden in it.
Well, that's excellent. And one reason why it's good is because one of the main strategies of the antis has been to deny funding to research about smoking that isn't actively a part of the campaign to get rid of it.
And she brings that up, and
She does, yeah, we've read the same thing.
And she actually had an exchange with Simon Chapman,
Okay,
and he was exceedingly rude to her.
really?
Because, you know, Simon Chapman, we've seen things that he's written that have been great. He's one of the...
Reasonable, anyway.
Well, yeah, reasonable. That's great for professional anti-tobacco activists. But,
No, yeah, there's no reason to be rude to anybody, ever, so...
yeah, well, a lot of these people in the tobacco control movement are pretty... they can be very vicious people, as you know, very vicious.
And that's why I like the idea of a slogan for a sign, nice people smoke.
Well, I mean, are you going to do a new sign for us, or you know, you're the artistic member of one of the artistic members of Cambridge Citizens?
Sure, that could be my sign. I think that's important. Antis are not nice. Nice people smoke, and nice non-smokers don't make an issue of it.
But for our table in Harvard Square, do you have any ideas for a different text?
You mean that would relate, that would speak of the
we
issue?
think that having simply to smokers' rights is not conducive enough to attract.
You know, I think if I can design something eye-catching, it might be provocative.
Well, listen, Paul, we've only got 10 seconds left. Let's thank our viewers and thank CCTV for putting on our show. Good night.
Thank you very much.